My son called me the morning of his wedding and said 4 words I will never forget. Good luck, and hung up. He had already emptied my bank account. He had already sold my house, and he thought that was the end of it. If you're watching this, tell me where you're listening from, and stay until the end, because what I did next, he never saw coming. I'm Victor Gallagher. I'm 71 years old. I spent 30 years as a chief compliance officer hunting offshore financial fraud for a major Chicago investment firm. That morning was quiet, the kind of crisp Texas morning made for black coffee on the porch. My house had been silent since my wife Diana passed. I opened my banking app to pay a utility bill. The balance read 0. A week earlier, it had read $485,000. That money wasn't my retirement. It was Diana's life insurance payout, the exact amount we needed to open a youth shelter in her memory. Her legacy, gone. I didn't gasp. I didn't panic. 30 years of hunting thieves teaches you that panic is the enemy of a clear mind. Then I heard a thud from the hallway. 2 movers were hauling out my antique console table, the one Diana and I bought on our honeymoon. My key wouldn't turn in the lock. They'd drilled it out. Their work order had an authorization signature I'd know anywhere. My 32-year-old son, Derek. Derek was marrying a woman named Brooke the next day, in a $200,000 wedding he couldn't afford. I'd refused to pay for it. I wanted him to learn responsibility. Instead, he'd decided to steal his dead mother's legacy to fund the party. I told the movers to be careful with the table legs and let them finish. The first rule of catching a thief: let him think he's won. I walked into the garden, called my lawyer, Martin Rosenberg, and said 2 words: Plan B. Then I called Derek. Loud bass music, champagne glasses. "Hello," he shouted over the noise, annoyed I'd interrupted his party. I told him about the movers, the empty account. His slur vanished, replaced by a tone I swear he'd practiced in a mirror. "My wedding's tomorrow." This is the most important weekend of my life. I withdrew the money. I sold the house. Good luck. Then, "You're old. You're not thinking clearly. After your stroke last year, Brooke and I agreed. You don't need this money sitting around. Consider it an early inheritance." He told me to put myself in a nursing home. Then he hung up. I stood in the driveway with the Texas sun on my shoulders and ice in my veins. I had the whole call recorded. A minute 42 of pure fraud and elder abuse, time-stamped and secure. I didn't call the police. A domestic dispute gets buried in paperwork. I needed something bigger. In my car, I pulled a laptop from the glove box. The same laptop Derek always mocked me for carrying, not realizing the security protocols behind his own banking app were ones I helped design. I routed through 3 VPNs and pulled the raw transaction logs. An outgoing wire, $485,000, sent through a clearinghouse and landed in a new account at a bank in Dallas. My account was in Delaware. Moving stolen funds across state lines isn't a family matter. It's federal wire fraud. Derek had authorized the transfer with a scanned power of attorney, the one I'd signed after my minor stroke last year, and revoked the day I left the hospital. The expiration date had been crudely altered. Forgery, aggravated identity theft. He'd built his entire scheme on federal felonies, and he had no idea. I backed everything up to an encrypted server and sent a copy to Martin. Then I drove, not to confront him, but to watch him. I took an Uber to the rented mansion where Derek and Brooke were hosting their rehearsal dinner. White marble, live jazz, champagne, wealthy strangers congratulating themselves. I walked in wearing yesterday's khakis. Brooke spotted me first. Her smile vanished. She marched over, dug her nails into my wrist, and hissed that I was ruining her aesthetic, that I looked homeless, that Derek had taken over my finances because I was clearly deteriorating. She threatened to have security throw me out. Derek dragged me into a private study and closed the door. He told me, almost gently, that my stroke had made me a liability, that the house was too much, that he'd taken the money for my own protection. He handed me the forged power of attorney like a trophy. I let my hands shake. I let a tear fall, not from sadness, but disgust. When I was hospitalized after my stroke, the nurses called Derek 3 times. He never answered. He was on a beach in Cabo with Brooke. I recovered completely alone. And now he stood in a tuxedo paid for with my dead wife's money, lecturing me about being cared for. Before I left, Brooke blocked the doorway, shoved a folded $100 bill into my jacket pocket, and told me to take a cab to a cheap motel and not ruin her photos. I thanked her. I bowed my head. I let her believe she'd won. Outside, alone in the dark, I understood exactly what Derek had done. By using a forged legal document to authorize an interstate wire transfer, he'd handed federal prosecutors an airtight case. Arrogance is always the fatal flaw. At Martin's office past midnight, we reviewed everything. Wire logs, forged timestamps, the doctored power of attorney. Martin, a former federal prosecutor who'd known Derek since he was a boy, asked if I was certain. Filing this meant no turning back. My son would become a felon. Blood is a biological accident, I told him. It's not a free pass to destroy the people who raised you. I signed the report myself. Martin submitted it straight to the FBI's Cybercrimes Division. By 3 a.m., the case was open. But there was more. Martin pulled the property records on my house, and it hadn't just been listed. It had been sold, in cash, in under 24 hours, for $600,000, half its actual value, to a shell company called Apex Holdings, incorporated 3 days earlier. Derek wasn't just stealing money. He was liquidating everything, fast, like a man planning to disappear. I traced the credit card behind the shell company's filing fee. It led to a man named Chad, a personal trainer with a public, vanity-soaked social media page. Buried in his photos was my answer. Dozens of images of him and Brooke, entwined at his gym, captioned with hearts. Brooke wasn't just marrying my son, she was cheating on him, with the man buying my stolen house. Derek wasn't the mastermind, he was the mark. Brooke and Chad had orchestrated the entire fire sale, using my son's desperation and greed to rob him, and me, blind. I remembered the hidden security system I'd installed when Diana was sick. Cameras Derek knew about and complained about, not realizing the actual recorders were hardwired into the walls, independent of the visible units he'd unplugged. Every second was still uploading to a private cloud. I pulled the footage from 3 nights earlier. Brooke and Chad, walking into my living room like they owned it. Chad pouring himself my late wife's rare scotch without asking, toasting, to the easiest payday of my life. Mocking Derek as an absolute moron who'd handed over $1 million house for half price. Brooke laughing that she couldn't wait to stop pretending to love him, that once the wedding money cleared, they'd fly to Dubai and leave Derek standing at the altar with nothing but a felony. Crystal clear audio and video, undeniable, unfakeable. Martin wanted to send it straight to the FBI. I said no. Agents work on a bureaucratic timeline. I wanted Derek, Brooke, and Chad standing at the absolute height of their arrogance when the walls came down, not quietly cuffed at an airport at midnight. Then Martin found something worse. The $600,000 Chad used to buy my house hadn't come from a bank. It came from Silver State Financial Services, a front for a violent local loan-sharking syndicate the DA had been trying to indict for years. Chad had borrowed cartel-adjacent money, betting he could flip my house fast and vanish before anyone noticed. If the deal collapsed, men would come looking for him, and anyone near him. Martin begged me to hand everything to the authorities immediately. I told him the dominoes were already perfectly aligned. Because here was the detail Derek never bothered to check. 5 years earlier, when Diana got sick, I'd moved every major asset, the house, the investment accounts, the life insurance architecture, into an irrevocable blind trust in Delaware. I hadn't legally owned that house in 5 years. The deed Derek found and stole was a decoy I'd planted for exactly this scenario. He'd forged my signature and sold a piece of worthless paper to a criminal shell company. And the account that received Chad's $600,000 wasn't a real account. It was a honeypot, wired into the trust's fraud detection system. The instant that money landed, it was automatically frozen under federal review. Chad couldn't touch it, couldn't return it, couldn't explain it to the men who'd lent it to him without confessing to a felony on a recorded line. Derek was broke, homeless in his own mind, and staring at prison. Brooke was engaged to a man with nothing, and Chad had $600,000 of cartel debt with absolutely no way to pay it back. I went home, showered, and put on the charcoal Tom Ford suit I'd worn the day I retired. the suit of a man who spent 30 years dismantling people exactly like this. Platinum cufflinks from Diana. I folded Brooke's $100 bill into my pocket. I was ready. Martin drove me to the estate, 300 guests, white roses, a lake, a string quartet, every petal paid for with my stolen legacy. I walked to the back, found the sound technician's table, and pulled the power cable from the mixing board. The speakers died. The priest's mouth kept moving with no sound. 300 heads turned. I walked down the aisle in dead silence. Derek saw me and went white, then furious, shouting for security. Brooke screamed at them to drag me out. I ignored all of it, climbed the stage, and took the microphone from the frozen wedding singer. I told Derek, calmly, in front of everyone, the deed he stole was worthless. The house was never his to sell. The $485,000 was already flagged by the FBI, and the account was frozen. He swayed on his feet. Then I plugged my phone into the sound system and hit play. Brooke's voice, unmistakable, boomed across the lake. It's finally going to happen now. Chad's voice, to the easiest payday of my life. Her laughter, mocking Derek as a fool. Chad calling him a moron who'd handed over $1 million house for half its worth. Brooke's voice again, cold and clear. We take the $485,000. We take the $600,000. Our flight to Dubai boards at 2 a.m. By Sunday, he'll be broke, wifeless, and staring at a federal indictment. 300 guests sat in horrified silence. Derek looked at Brooke like she was a stranger. She sobbed, mouthing that it was fake, but the voices were unmistakable. In the third row, Chad tried to slip away. I called him out by name and told him the exits weren't an option anymore. I turned back to my son and told him exactly what he'd done. Forged my signature, wired stolen money across state lines, committed federal wire fraud with mandatory minimum sentencing, and lost his fiancée and his freedom in the same afternoon. That's when Chad's phone started ringing. I told him to answer it, to explain to Silver State Financial Services why their $600,000 was frozen in a federal account and gone for good. He dropped the phone like it burned him. Then the sirens came. 3 black SUVs tore through the fence, ripping up the lawn, and a dozen FBI agents in tactical vests swarmed the altar. Derek didn't resist. He was cuffed in his tuxedo, utterly broken. Chad tried to run and was tackled face first into the mud. Brooke collapsed at my feet in her ruined wedding gown, grabbing my trousers, begging me to tell the agents she was innocent, that Chad had manipulated her, that she loved Derek. I peeled her fingers off my suit. I pulled the folded $100 bill from my pocket, the one she'd shoved into my chest the night before, and let it fall into her lap. "Take a taxi, Brooke," I said. "Your aesthetic is ruined." Then I walked away. 6 months later, I sit on my restored porch with black coffee, watching the autumn light move through the oak tree. Every piece of furniture is back where it belongs. The house doesn't feel hollow anymore. It feels safe. Derek took a plea deal and is serving 5 years in federal prison. He writes sometimes. I don't answer. His letters read like a man sorry he got caught, not sorry for what he did. Maybe 5 years teaches him the value of an honest dollar. Brooke is under federal investigation for conspiracy, abandoned by every friend who once admired her, working retail to cover her legal bills. Chad vanished 3 days after the wedding, leaving his cars and his business behind, running from men who will never stop looking for what he owes them. This morning, Martin arrived with the final documents. The court restored my $485,000 and released Chad's frozen $600,000 to me as restitution. I signed the papers on my porch. Next week, we cut the ribbon on the Diana Gallagher Youth Shelter, a safe haven for children who have nowhere else to go, built from the wreckage of everyone who thought silence meant weakness. They forgot one thing. A silent man is just a man doing the math on your ruin. Family isn't blood, it's respect. And at 71, my life isn't over, it's just been properly audited.